How you doing?
I am well, thank you. How are you?
We are brilliant. Lovely
Good.
to have you.
No worries, dude. I am still training, but I will turn my mic off when I'm grunting.
Okay. Thank you.
Haven't
That
officially
would be
met
great.
Donald, but hello. I'm sure we'll get to see each other soon. Okay.
Maybe he's grunting. Maybe he's just grunting. I can't hear you.
It is grunting. Great.
Maybe we should hear the grunts. Maybe we want to. I don't know. He wants to hear the grunts.
Oh, that's why I love this crazy
Different kind of
group.
meeting.
This is so crazy. All right. Well, let's get started. Because Eddie needs an early night. I don't know what I need. And Tony, Tony needs an early night too. So yes.
Bring it on.
So the topic for today that I wanted to talk about was to do with love languages. And it's not love languages in the traditional sense, because everything that we talk about is to do with brotherhood and just manhood and things like that. And I thought it would be a beautiful topic to talk about tonight. Love languages within our friendships as men. Okay, and it's not a topic that people talk about a lot about. When I said it to a friend earlier on, it was just like, that is such a young topic, and I was like, yes, it is, because me, I'm the romantic. I'm always giving love. When I'm not being a monster, that is. I'm always giving love. So I just want to talk about that. So the first talking point was just, as a rule, do you know what your love language is? And if you do, how does that apply to your friendship to other men? Do you feel like you have a love language when it comes to your friends, your male friends?
I know my top, because I did the love languages quiz thing that there is online. So my top 3 are physical touch, words of affirmation, and then what was the third one? I can't remember what the third one was. Basically, physical touch and words of affirmation are big ones for me. So it's why I can be doing really, really well, but I will, if somebody says something, so if somebody whose opinion I care about says something negative to me when I'm not in the right place to receive it, it can be really, really damaging to kind of like my mental health and my mental state.
Right.
So I have to be very mindful of where my own subconscious mind goes when people are giving me criticism. I have to almost preempt the fact I'm going to get criticism and be ready to receive that, just because my 8-year-old in my head does not like receiving. It's always seeking daddy's approval. I just know that's kind of like what's going on. So for me, it's very much reminding myself and my self-talk about the fact that somebody, even though they are criticizing me, they're doing it from a place of love, and they're doing it to try and help me, not whatever the voice in my head is trying to tell me is going on.
Okay. And how does that translate then with your relationship with other men in your life? Because that's what I'm interested to try and find out. Do they apply? Are they different, do you feel? How does that manifest itself?
I have a very small circle, and I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of get involved with this group, is my circle is so small at the moment. And because I'm an online trainer as well, before I would be seeing people when I was at work. Now, like, unless I choose to put myself in situations with other guys, or I text someone first, I'm very, very isolated. So in terms of like my relationship, there isn't really many. It's hard to say, just because I don't have that many ongoing male kind of like friendships / relationships on a regular basis. So it's kind of easy to, if you don't see each other very often, you're probably not going to be criticizing somebody, if that makes sense. And there tends to be a bit of I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. Let me get back to you on that one. I'll have a little think about it.
No, that's fine. That's fine, and that's what the is. I wasn't expecting people to come with answers necessarily. A lot of it is kind of prompting the conversation and just getting people thinking, because it's something that I thought of a lot. So that's why it was interesting to hear people's perspectives. Eddie and Tony, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, when I first heard what you'd said with love language, I was a bit unsure, but now I completely relate to what Donald just said. You know, my circle is very, very small, and when I say that, I probably have 2 very close male friends, but otherwise everyone's female. And again, that's why I loved getting involved with you guys in the beginning, because it was nice to, you know, offload, speak about things that I wouldn't normally, well, I felt like I couldn't speak about. And it's interesting because I find I have this certain way of being with males, especially at the, you know, where I work, Holland Barrett, with customers and other boys, I'd say. In general, I don't even know how to describe it, but I act very differently with them. And I suppose that's why I've been quite isolated for most of my life, because I'd always keep men at this sort of distance, and, you know, or my immediate thing, especially if they're good looking or something like that, I'll be like, hello, and I'm like, oh, they're probably thinking I'm going to be coming onto them, you know, and I
Right, okay.
get into that kind of like, no, I'm being this. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, it's like that. And then I have the small, close knit people that I can feel I can talk about or talk to, should I say.
Very complex, very complex. I like it. Eddie?
Oh, sorry. Oh, it wouldn't let me unmute then. Sorry about that. I pressed it 3 times and it was like, nope. Yeah, this is actually really complicated for me now. I've just realised with this topic coming up, I'm sat here thinking I'm ready for this, and I'm like, I know how to answer, but actually it's harder because I did the love languages thing online years ago, like Deej said, he did. And then it was really straightforward, or it felt straightforward. I had a lot of different people around me, male friends, female friends. I had there were close relationships at the time. They weren't perhaps as close as I thought they were, and certainly now they don't exist at all, those friendships. So then I thought that what my test came out at with my love languages, that was easy enough. It applied to all those people at the time, and those were physical touch, words of affirmation, and quality time. And I felt like I was getting a lot of that. Like I said, though, I realized like sometime later those relationships weren't as authentic as I thought at the time. And coming away from that and now having this question posed at this time, I've said for years, and my wife would say the same about me, like we are each other's best friend. But when it comes to like friendships, it's tough because I don't have like people who I can go and meet as well, which is very important because physical touch is important to me, like a hug, you know, an arm round a friend. And I am talking male friends as well here, predominantly actually. That's difficult because I don't actually have any very close friends. I have one friend that I've known since we were teenagers who doesn't really reciprocate that kind of that language in a friendship. So me going for a hug for him is kind of like, oh, I'll hug you, but it's uncomfortable for me, and that's fine. I wouldn't push it with him if he said no. You know, it's a tricky one, that. And I think I always found it easier to go for female friendships because females are typically better at the physical touch and the words of affirmation, as where with men it's like handshake and like, oh, shut up, dickhead, you know, all that kind of talk, you know, amongst male groups.
I was about to say, like with men, it's a lot more like you razz each other, don't you? You give each other shit, and that's like that's how they bond. Because I see it with my kids and stuff, how they go at each other all the time, and that's actually how they show affection. When actually, for somebody who, as you were saying before, has got words of affirmations very, very important to them, it might be causing some sort of
yeah, absolutely. So basically, I think now it's harder for me because I don't have those connections, especially with men, where I can go and have that stuff like in person. But I'm realizing that actually I have built or now have closer relationships with people, even if they're just online. Like, well, one example would be you, Jan. We've spent a lot of time talking, getting to know each other better, and we've built an even better relationship. It's great. I love it. What it's missing, I guess, is the fact that I can't have some of those love languages met.
Yeah.
You know, because the people that I'm connecting with now, the people that I really feel like I'm coming closer to, they're not here. They're not down the road. You know, I can't access that stuff. And so for me, that's a really tricky one, and that's why it's hard to answer it any differently to that. I want to be able to have those things still, and I do get some of that met with affirmation, even the quality time that can be done over video chat. But actually, that one thing, that physical touch, that hug, that going and seeing a friend in person is missing currently for me.
Yeah.
So it's a tough one, and I realized actually as this conversation started, like I said, I went for a cuddle with my wife earlier just because I was feeling run down. I was like, can I just have a hug? That's all I need, just a hug. We laid and we just hugged. It's great, but with friends, you know, it's different, isn't it? It's harder. So yeah, I mean that's me with that one. It's a tough one. It's changing though. I think it's evolving. It's changing because I'm not relying on those female friendships to meet that need as well. And it's been kind of rocky ground in the past anyway, because it's always kind of confused with where we're going with these relationships and things. So I mean, it shouldn't be the case, but it has been. So it's a hard one. Yeah, I think it is evolving though, and I'm learning that I can have some of these things without it being so hard to reach.
Yeah. I think, you know, for me, because I had such a journey with all this, you know, for me for a long time, you know, this is, I think Open Door was kind of the first, well, the second time that I operated in a group of all guys, you know, because like, I had mixed groups of friends, you know, so, you know, I benefited, the girls kind of sweetened things, you know, girls always sweeten things. The guys we were all quite similar emotionally, so there was a lot of love there. You know, I've never had friends that were, you know, like necessarily like you guys were describing, that were like, you know, giving each other the banter. And like, we had that, but there was love, because that's what I like. When it's too much banter, I don't like it. You know, I'm just like, you know, no, I like the soft stuff. And so it wasn't until, you know, I had, you know, the Open Door guys, and then I started seeing all the different guys that came on the group. The fact that we all shared that emotional need in the sense of way to kind of have that I started operating in that, and then I started to open up, and I started to get that, and you know, and then I realized that that part of my love language needs was developed. It developed in a different way. It did, and so for me, my love languages tend to be quality time and affirmations. They're kind of big things for me as well. And so for me, like I've been able to translate it. Quality time for me is talking, because obviously, because they get a lot of the friends are not physically there, but it's phone calls. And some people are like, oh yeah, because a lot of guys don't actually like to call, but I force them to, you know. It's like, if you're gonna be friends with me, we need to talk, you know, because I need to develop this, you know. For me, it's a very emotional thing. You know, I know Tony was talking about orientation as well, the other aspects that brings into it. It can be very tricky. It can, you know, and this is something that I've found as well. with me with last year, kind of owning, myself, just kind of like, meeting guys and new guys, and then having that block that I was talking about on the group the other day. And so these things come into that, and it can be very challenging. It can be very tricky. But one thing that I definitely know from my experience is that men want these kind of connections. They do. Men crave these kind of connections with each other. There's a thing that I strongly believe, that men save other men. There's nothing quite the same as when your brothers come to your rescue, when your brothers are present for you. And I know that for a fact because I've been the recipient. I've also been the one that's given that. And there's nothing more beautiful than that. And that's why I dedicate a lot of what I do to nurturing, these friendships, nurturing these connections, and in a way, teaching men to develop these bonds, creating safe spaces. And that, for me, is crucial for us. So I'm veering a little bit off, and I'm going to ask you, what does a safe space look like in a male kind of setting? What does that safe space look like to you, or should look like to you, in your friendships as men?
Can I go first with this one, if that's okay, guys? Yeah, I feel it's very important for me, and I'm sure it is, as you said, Jan, like, men do actually want this stuff, and it's just getting under the skin in a good way, and saying, what is it that you're missing? What is it that you feel like is stopping you from getting that? But for me, I find it quite easy to say this because, again, I like physical touch, but also you can't be getting in a room or whatever, or in a chat like this with guys that all kind of feel the same about each other. So if I had that friendship group, if I had that, and I'm not just talking this, guys, obviously I respect you all and love you all for what you do and who you are anyway, but I'm talking about like deeper relationships with a larger group of people. And I think if I had that and had that regularly and access to that regularly, it would look for me like, yes, we can all sit around and have a laugh. Yes, we all can. There's a bit of banter, maybe. There is a bit of kind of, ribbing each other, just saying, oh, yeah, you're up to that again, whatever. But ultimately, it would come down to hearing each other, like listening to each other, letting somebody speak, but actually everybody in that room hearing what that person's saying. I think I've talked about this before in other topics we've discussed, but it's one thing that actually has a thread through every topic that you can imagine, I think. And that's because if you're going to have a friendship, you should be able to have a friendship where you can engage about any topic with those guys. And I think that's really important, whether it's your marriage, something to do with your sexuality you're exploring, or an issue you have with someone. It could be anything, or a positive thing. But for me, it would look like speaking, really hearing what that person's saying, and then not trying to fix it, not trying to advise it with a hope to fix it, or with the view to making something happen overnight. It doesn't have to be that. It just has to be, I hear you, I hear you, bro, and I'm here right now. I don't know what to do in this situation to help you, but I'm here. And I've heard you, and I can give you a hug. I can reassure you. I can spend more time with you. And that's I think that's all you can really ask for. Beyond that, it's what the other person is, I guess, willing to do or accept in meeting you in part with these things, these issues, or these topics that you do discuss, because obviously it has to work from both sides. So yeah, mutual, safe, genuine, heartfelt discussion and just love for each other. And I think that's a beautiful thing. If I had that regularly, then anything else wouldn't be so difficult to deal with, I think, because I think that's where it starts and that's where it needs to be.
Very true. Very true.
Well, I mean, if I can, because I didn't realize until you guys started speaking about it, but for me, I get a sense that everyone that sort of comes into my shop or, you know, around my town, etc., especially with the guys, I am always either fist bumping them or giving them a little, you know, tap, etc. So I didn't realize that I am quite physical with a lot of men without even realizing it until I'm, you know, until you've sort of speaking about it now. And I think that's why I love my job so much now, is before it used to be talking to guys for 5 minutes while they're having a drink, and you know, you have a little, you know, 5 minute okay, right, that's enough now, let's move on, to where now in the shop or even just on the street in general, um you know, just being like, oh, you know, you can tell me, let's talk about this, or I'll start first. And suddenly they're like, oh, do you know what, yes, and suddenly you're completely deeper in a conversation that you wouldn't normally with people, you know, in general, if that makes sense. Um, and yeah, and then you find three times later you've met them, and suddenly you're, well, speaking about things that you would never speak about with anyone, um, you know, just usually, I suppose. Um, so yeah, don't know if I was going off topic there, but yeah, I suppose I'm sort of just realizing a few things now, especially with straight men. Um, there, I think it's me to work on that I was speaking about earlier. Is I think from childhood, being at an all boys school and being picked on so much for, you know, oh, what are you doing, looking at me like that, touching me, blah blah blah. I think now society has changed a hell of a lot,
Mm.
and yeah, I mean, just realizing the amount of customers that I have that come in, give me a shake, or, you know, even if they're Spanish, for goodness sake, you know, give them a two kiss, and, you know, that kind of thing. And it's just normal. Um,
Yeah.
so, yeah, yeah, it's quite interesting actually having a little realization there. So, yeah, cool.
It's yeah, I love that you bring that dimension, the different orientation, because like I said, this is something that, you know, I've kind of had to kind of navigate through, you know, just kind of how you just kind of, yeah, how you kind of reconcile that aspect with perceptions and things that you may have experienced before, or the way that things were before, you know, even like, you know, the way that you present yourself, like, you know, do you, how much do you share, how much do you say, you know, that kind of stuff, it comes into that. And I think male culture has made these things so difficult. You know? These things have just been made to be so difficult, to the point that, you know, we're often triple guessing ourselves, second guessing ourselves, and, you know, it's not always easy to navigate. So when we talk about safe spaces, to me, it's absolutely crucial. It's absolutely crucial for us as men to create these safe spaces for each other, because we look at each other as adults now, but I look at us as children, you know, as, you know, when we used to be children, when we used to be boys, and the things that we went through, you know, some of us were scarred by these things, like Tony, you mentioned, some of us were affected by these things, and that in turn affects the man that we become and the relationship with men that we have, you know. Yeah, for me, like I said, you know, I grew up like, you know, a lot of men I've always had a very difficult relationship. You know, I get to a point, and then growing up, guys always want to compete with me. I've always been in my own lane, doing my own thing. You befriend me, you're like, oh yeah, this guy's popping, this guy's doing this. Okay, let me try and fight. Let me try and get. And I've never quite understood that. That's followed me right up until now. You know, in business, in life, I've always had people, and you're talking straight men if you want, you know, just kind of like bringing that out of them. And that's been difficult. So then to me, it's kind of like, well, I need a safe space. I need to create the safe spaces. And that's how I created this platform. Because I thought, you know what, there's got to be men out there that not necessarily have the same experiences as me, but that need this, that have been affected by masculinity in a bad way, but that want the opportunity to show that masculinity can be beautiful, it can be positive, it can be loving, and it can be a safe space. And when I started this community, I didn't think it would attract many people, if I'm honest with you guys, I didn't think so. But it's when I started to see that it was like a magnet to certain type of guys. And I was just like, wow. So I wasn't that alien. I wasn't that alone in the way that I was feeling. There's plenty of other men that are feeling that way. That's when I saw how important that was, and how beautiful it can be.
Yeah, it is a beautiful thing. I really do agree with you. And I think more men need to be able to hear this stuff and access it without fear of being judged or pushed to one side by other men that are like they are or were, maybe. I think that's really important but it's how you get through to people that's the tricky thing, because you might say something that comes across very nurturing, very feminine, very, caring. Let's be honest. It might just sound like, it's too positive, it's too caring, it's too, it's too soft for me. I don't want it. I don't want that. I'm a man. And that's where it trips. Yeah, and that's where it trips them up, isn't it? Because that kind of man, that stereotype. That stereotype.
That wasn't a grunt. What was that?
That was me moving a bench.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that stereotype, obviously, they believe that they have to be that to some degree, or that they are, and that's enough because, what else is a man supposed to be?
It's the whole toxic masculinity argument, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think that we know about that, and we know how damaging it is, but it's how we reach other men. Like I said before, with my friend, I've known him for a long time, 27 years now. It's a heck of a long time to know somebody. But I don't, after our last conversation, I don't think he believes that he will ever get to where I feel I am. And that's okay in part. Like, I wouldn't pressure or force anybody to understand or to reach the goals that I've reached. I wouldn't, force that on them in a way that made it feel patronizing or demeaning in any way, like that they're less than me. But I want that for him. I want that for other guys. And I think it's getting through to other men, this idea that, yes, you can be a man. Yes, you can do all those manly things, but you can also be feminine, and you can be nurturing, you can be kind, considerate, you can be a good listener. That up to a certain point, we only ever thought women were good at, which is ridiculous.
But again, it's that binary understanding. See, I'm putting my Jolly hat on now. Love you, Jolly. That's the binary thing where it's like, well, these set of characteristics are feminine. This set of characteristics are masculine. I don't see it like that, and I think that maybe that's because of that's the way I've always operated that way. I'm a man. I've got all these qualities. Like I said, I can be a monster. I can be a monster. I can be an ox. You give me all these things. I've got the strength, whatever. But I'm also very soft. I love a cuddle. I love to say that I love people. I love to hear that people love me. And to me, that's just part of me. Like, it's not feminine side, masculine side. It's not. Even when we talk about orientation, I don't even think it's valid. I think people are what they are. They've got the qualities that they have. They have the virtues that they have. I don't necessarily believe in the binary part.
Have you guys read the book Men Are From Mars and Women From Venus?
I've heard of it, but I haven't read it, no.
I'm about 2/3 of the way through it at the moment, and in that it explains how it's not necessarily a physiological thing that men have these traits and women have these traits. It's very much a societal thing that we as boys see how our mum and dad interact, and it's almost imprinted on us that these are masculine traits and these are feminine traits. It's changing now because of women going to work. The roles are becoming more even kind of like throughout the household, but there still seems to be this predominant thing of men tend to put on their Mr. Fix-It hat rather than listening. And it was like what you were saying earlier about creating that safe space of just learning the skill of listening rather than waiting for your time to talk. Like, I know I'm very, very guilty of it when my partner comes home and she's had a shit day, and what she wants is me just to listen, to ask questions, and she doesn't need me to solve her problem. She's more than capable of doing that. She wouldn't be in the job that she was in if she wasn't. But when I'm under stress, my Mr. Fix-It hat comes on and I stop listening and I start solving her problems. And then I wonder why then she gets agitated with me, because that's not what she wants. And it's the same thing when men are speaking to each other. It's not about solving that other guy's problem. It's about listening and being there. And like you said, just going, you know what? I don't need to solve this for you. You know what you need to do. You just needed to have somebody that's going to listen to you and not judge you. And I think that's what a lot of men don't have, because they're then afraid of opening up, or because the guy's either going to offer them unsolicited advice, which they don't want, or they're going to take the piss out of them, being like, why are you thinking like that, you pussy, or something like that. And I think that's where the problem is, as in there isn't enough of these safe spaces for men to go into where they feel comfortable and confident enough to be able to open themselves up and be able to talk about the things that are really going on underneath the skin.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you mentioned about the societal roles and what we see of mom and dad. And I said this to, I don't know if Eddie, I think we had that conversation. For me, it's different. I think that's the reason why I'm the way that I am, because when I grew up, my dad was extremely tender with me. You know, my dad was the soft one. You know, mom was more of the disciplinarian or whatever. So, you know, I got my cuddles, my kisses from my dad or whatever else. So that's what I grew up with. You know, so for me, I saw that very early on, and it normalized this. I was like, oh, you know, dad's like that, so it's okay, like, you know, whatever. So, you know, so as I grew up, I was never ashamed of that, you know. And so when you put it like that, I can understand why, you know, a lot of other men would look at the example of the dad that they had and just think that it's okay, that's how it is, so I'm just going to follow it, you know. It makes sense. Obviously, my example is what it is, where there was a lot of nurture, there was a lot of that kind of stuff, so I embodied that. And so if in the reverse, there was a lot of, you know, man up, get up, dry, you know, boys don't cry, that kind of stuff. And of course, you kind of mirror that in a way. You know, I don't want to generalize, but I guess that's how it would work. Am I right? Am I wrong? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's.
I'm sorry, go on, Dean. You first.
I was going to say, I think that's the point that I was trying to make, is that I don't know what age bracket we're kind of like all in, but I think we're somewhere between like the late 70s to early 90s babies. And so it puts our parents then of the generation of, again, it's one of those things where their parents were probably the World War II generation. They lived through some horrific stuff, but they then parent like their parents, and then we tend to then parent like them, unless you choose to break that cycle. But I think the world in general has moved on a little bit more now, as in people are willing to talk about it. It's not just, oh, he's having a bad day. It's, oh, it's about his mental health. And I think that is very, very important, is to get people to talk about it and to realize that it's not set in stone, that you can change these things if you choose to, and if you make a conscious decision. And I think too many people are still just running around on autopilot.
Yeah, it's just that you say that as well, because I keep visualizing. Maybe this is why you know, I love working where I do so much, is speaking to men in that sort of setting. uh, I see it now as a very big spectrum. You know, one day I can have a very old gentleman that wants to come in and talk about this, that, the other, and he's very serious about it. And we're talking, we get very deep into fixing his problem for his prostate, you know, and sometimes, well, he would never talk to a younger guy about it. Well, I'm, again, maybe I'm generalizing, but and then the other end of the spectrum where you've got a 20-year-old that's come in to talk about this, and suddenly we're having this 5-minute banter and he walks out going, oh, do you know what, that was so cool, I would never have asked someone, but thank you for your help, you know, that kind of thing. But I see now that I have to be in that mode, or that sort of me space, for me to talk to people like that, if that makes sense. Where then I come out of work mode and yes, I'll speak to you, etc. But my circle is literally down to, you know, a handful. So yes, I do see, and completely agreeing with the whole 80s, 90s thing. I think society has moved on to sort of now where it's, well, I don't know if it's, people are talking more and sort of speaking out, but there's a spectrum, as I meant earlier. You know, some people will go to a certain point where they'll be like, oh no, you know what, I'm enough now, I'm not going to go that far, if that makes sense. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Tony. Just quickly on, I've seen that a lot in my life. Like, you know, people going about their daily business and whatever they're involved in. And this by no means, Tony, is a picking on you. It's just you've highlighted something that I've thought about before, but probably not in this way, in this context. And I think it's really important to realize that what you do as a profession, or what you do when you're with certain people, doesn't have to stop there if you're really good at that, you know, and it's finding a way to feed that into your social life or your relationships as well. And because if you're really good at it and you enjoy what you do, why not let that feed into these friendships? And it's hard because that's another thing I believe, that we've been told that we have to do our job, but then when we leave that job, we have to be something else and something else and something else. And, you know, if you enjoy what you do and you're good at that, then why not let that be present?
And thank
But
you.
I think,
Sorry, just to say, because I think that's the realization I had earlier, is that as I come away from that, I put up the barrier or whatever it is, and I'm suddenly like, oh no, you know, I'm not in that space, and maybe I need to explore it more to sort of be like, actually, yes, I should. Well, I mean, I still advise, etc., outside of work, but I'm a different person when I'm there. But yeah, so thank you for that. It's something I'm going to reflect on.
so what was interesting to me in what you said was, do you feel like you connect better with men when you're in that mode, as opposed to if they met you as you? Because that's what got my attention there.
Yes, because
Right.
I mean, for me, I'm a gay man, you know, I'm quite flamboyant at times, but I can, again, talking about the spectrum, I can be very, well, straight, I mean, sorry to, you know, use these words, it's so, you know, straight acting at times and be in a certain mode. And then sometimes, you know, come running out the store with my hands in the air going, oh, I'm Lady Gaga, you know. So I think I think there is, there is something there. What was the question you asked again, Jan, please?
No, it was just something that I noticed about, you know, do you feel like you connect better with men when you're in that role,
Yeah.
as opposed to if you were yourself?
Quite, yeah, I think quite possibly, because if I go to a bar, I went to a bar, maybe 2 weeks ago with some friends that I'd met up recently, and yeah, you know, I'm sort of like, oh, I feel a little bit reserved, as it were, where if I was to be in work setting or at the shop, where I'm just like, hello, welcome, you know, let's talk. You know, I'm more open, I suppose. So, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, no, and again, this is what I was saying earlier is, yeah, and it's particularly with men, because outside work or out, you know, inside or outside work with women, I'm always, well, I'm just always myself, I suppose. And I have a hell of a lot of female friends, but then when it comes to, yeah, talking to males, there's that, there was that, what I said earlier, it's just that, oh,
Uh,
I got to be a little bit reserved, because, you know, maybe me tapping on the shoulder and going, you know, they'll be like, what the hell are you touching me for? I'm not gay. You
Right.
know, that's
Right.
what I sense. But
Absolutely. You know, the reason why I picked up on that is because, you know, it's quite interesting. I've heard a lot of things recently about performative masculinity, for instance, in a sense that performative masculinity is the way that we kind of perform and act out our masculinity sometimes when we're in groups of men, so that we can fit in, I guess, you know. And that's not just something that's exclusive to, you know, anyone that's from the LGBTQ community or anything. Straight men as well, you know, straight men act their masculinity, you know, bisexual men act their masculinity, gay men act, you know, there's a certain act that we all put on, in a way, to be able to fit in. And, you know, I've always been aware of that. And that's why I said to you guys at the beginning that wherever I was in spaces where it was too much like that, I don't like these spaces. And I always made a point of not being part of these spaces because I just want to be me. You know? I mean, I'm the type of person, I can't stifle who I am. I can't. You know, I'm too authentic. I'm too myself to compromise that for X amount of time just to look a certain way. You know, so I've been aware of that for a long time. But for a lot of other men, means that's a means to survival in groups. It's a means to be accepted. You know, so is it right? Is it wrong?
well, I don't think it's wrong. I think it's just a mode to sort of act to not act out, I suppose, or get the wrong or incorrect sort of responses. Well, I say incorrect, but you know, a bad response. Well, that's how I see it, you know, because once I feel comfortable, I start to be a bit more like, oh, you know, we can go a little bit further, I suppose. Yeah.
I'd probably say it's a survival mechanism. Obviously, we evolved to be parts of groups. And as you said, like when you're in a group of men, you want to be accepted by that group of men. Like you feel like you've been rejected by your friends because they all start ganging up on you and taking the mick out of you, then that can be quite, depends on how old you are and how like secure you are in yourself, I'd say. Just because for me now, if my mates just started taking the piss out of me, I'd just give it back. I'm just like, I'm okay with who I am at my core now. Like even if I don't do something that you think is right, I just go, well, you're entitled to your own opinion. Let's just agree to disagree and move on, sort of thing. But I know for me, especially when I was like in my early 20s, like being part of the lads and part of that group and just going out and doing what everybody else was doing was a very, very big part of who I was. And it's only when I moved away from Liverpool and that friend group that I'd met at university that I kind of came into myself and started to spend more time on my own and be more reflective and go, well, what are my own core values? What is important to me? And I think now being a dad as well, like I want to teach my kids that like who you are is the most important thing, not what your friends think of you.
Especially if you have sons, that's it, because that's the one thing that, you know, with my son that I've looked at. And sometimes, you know, once he came home and he said, oh, Daddy, you know, my friends, because he's got quite a lot of, you know, little boy, like as friends, And he was like, oh, you know, my friends called me weird or something like that. And I stopped and I said, you know what? Everybody's a bit weird. Everyone's a bit weird. Don't let anybody single you out and tell you that you're weird, because you're not. They're weird too. They have their ways. You know, that's how it is. But I found it interesting that, you know, for a moment, he felt self-conscious. He started to question himself and whatever else. And I think it's my responsibility as a dad to remind him that he's not othered. He's not, you know, there's nothing wrong with him, you know, especially operating in his group of boys or whatever. And if he doesn't want to do what everybody else is doing, I teach him to say no. I teach him to move away. I teach him to stand on his own, because that's what his dad, that's what I was like. I never did what anybody else wanted me to do. Jan always did what Jan did. Whether people wanted to befriend me or not, that was what it was. I always be very integral to myself. So my biggest thing that I can pass on to my son is that, to not be a follower, but to be a leader in your own way, you know? And so it's very, very interesting. And I think the more we can foster that kind of mindset in our boys, I think that's when we start to, because there's this thing that I often say, and don't take it the wrong way, but it's something that I say, I'm like, you know what, the most powerful iron that you can pump is not what you can pump with your arms, it's what you can pump with your brain in your head, okay? It's the mental strength and how much you can handle and what you can pump, like the physical, the emotional, the physical, the emotional, the psychological strength that you have. And that, to me, when you teach your boy this, that the type of man that they become is invincible, you know? And I think we're in sorry?
I was going to say, I 100% agree in terms of the mental strength side of stuff. Like, I think that's why a lot of people struggle, because I call it participation trophy syndrome. There's a lot of entitlement, especially with my, I'm technically millennial. A lot of people that I've grown up around just think just by showing up, they should get what everybody else has got, rather than looking at what that person has done to get there. And it's something that I can't tell if this next generation is getting worse with it or slightly better at it, because the world is a much more unfair place. But I think it's very, very important, as you said, to teach our kids about mental strength, about that losing is okay. Actually, it's a very, very important lesson in life, that to fail is to learn one more way of not doing something. It doesn't mean to give up, it just means to try again in a different way.
Yeah.
Agreed.
It's all here. I think it all begins here. So yes, I mean, Eddie, how are we doing for time? Because you know me, I'm always time conscious.
Yeah, we've got like 9 minutes.
Okay, that's perfect. That's perfect. I mean, I think we've kind of like, you know, touched on all the and more, which is even perfect. And so the last thing that I wanted to kind of bring is, you know, that aspect. We've kind of spoken about it. The fact that as men is something that we kind of happy a lot of the time to be isolated and to be by ourselves and to go through things by ourselves, because there's a sort of for some men anyways, not all men, there's a sort of trophy, you know, there's like a trophy that you get for, you know, going through stuff by yourself and, you know, coming back. It's kind of like you've been thrown to the wolves, you come back leading the pack, you know, that kind of thing, you know. But I want to break that. And so as a platform, everything that we do is about, you know, the men that we're with, you know, the connections, the bonds that we're building. How can we be more mindful to not isolate ourselves as people and isolate other men as well? I'm interested to hear about that, then we'll close at that point.
Well, I think it's definitely important to try and lean into some of the things that we're not sure about, the things that we do kind of maybe resist as well. I think if we, because we all typically like things a certain way, don't we? Or at least we have our comforts, we have our go-to things that we get a lot of joy from, the people or the foods or the entertainment we use to occupy ourselves. But I think we need to try and lean into more of the things that kind of make us go, oh, I'm not sure about that. And because we become, it is about isolation, isn't it? But in isolation, you become stale, you become just, I don't know, you just kind of relax into what you're comfortable with. But actually, isolation, if you look at it in terms of when we were all isolated, when COVID started, people started to take up new hobbies, learn new skills, connect with people in different ways. So really, if you're taking time out and you are isolating yourself, then use that time to explore other avenues as well in your private time, try new things, talk to new people, take up a new hobby. But when it comes to these connections with men, with friendships, it's reaching out to those people you wouldn't normally reach out to. Having conversations with men that have at first seem very different to you, and having a conversation and allowing yourself to hear what it is they have to say, opening yourself up, isn't it, to just different experiences. That's how I feel it needs to kind of go, the direction we need to go. And that's how I feel I'm going. And I know that many other guys on this platform are doing that as well. I would love to see more people taking an opportunity to just say, hey, I wouldn't normally talk to that kind of guy, but I'm going to do that today. I don't like that conversation. It makes me very uncomfortable. But you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to go and have that conversation. Yeah, absolutely.
Love that. I'm all about the uncomfortable things. So this is great.
Well, I agree, and it, especially the last sort of few weeks, it has been the sort of the direction I've been going in. Like with what happened to me with the hospital and everything last week, never in a million years would I have put that to anybody but, close friends or family. But Helen was telling me after it all happened, she was like, you were adamant, you wanted to tell them, and she's like, why, you hardly know them. I was like, well, I do know them. And I felt that I needed to sort of reach out, and it felt uncomfortable. And speaking about this stuff, I feel like I needed what's the word? People to help lean on, to talk about, and to talk about it, because some of the immediate reactions from other close friends and that is, oh, you definitely need a psychiatrist, Tony, you need to stop doing this. And I'm like, no, that's not really what I wanted from you, that kind of thing. So yeah, I agree. I feel that if you do feel uncomfortable, which I have done a few times recently, is to follow it and keep going in that direction, to see what happens,
Well, can I just say on the back of that, Tony, really importantly, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, I think it was, I understand from hearing you, but I also know from when you were sharing that stuff last week that it must have been really difficult for you to do. So I hear that, and that's made me feel even more proud to be having this discussion, and just it really kind of hits me in all the right places, because you did that knowing how uncomfortable it would make you, and I really appreciate that, and I respect you for it. Like, that's so hard for men particularly to do, and because it's a pride thing, and it makes us uncomfortable. But again, it's taking that step into the uncomfortable and saying, fuck it, why not? I'm never going to get out of this if I don't do that.
Yeah. Yes. And I think the last sort of 6 months I I didn't realize it until recently, but how much I had gone like this with a lot of people and situations, especially with the group. And it wasn't until Jan had said it in a message, you know, we felt I don't know how he explained it, but I suddenly was like,
Yeah, it was a
yeah,
bit.
I was like, oh shit, yeah, that's right. You know, that's probably why I'd sort of been like, oh God, who the hell is this, that, the other? But I'm not gonna say anything for, you know, for about 6 months and see what happens, you know, kind of thing. But yeah, so thanks guys. It's good to be, it's nice to be back, and yeah, let's see what happens.
We reach out. You see, I've got a fishing line. Like, you know, when I'm like, oh, there's somebody I haven't heard for a while. unless they don't want to buy it on the other end, I'm always going to be reeling people in, because that's the purpose of this. That's the purpose of this platform. You know, it's a safe space. It's where we can, you know, because I know I've been in these situations where I look left, right, there wasn't anybody. Now I know for a fact that if there's anything, I can go to, you know, the Brotherhood group, because we're another group, like we've got this Zoom group, and I've got the Brotherhood group, where it's like, you know, you can drop anything and then I know I'm going to get support. I'm going to get people to listen to me. And this makes such a huge difference. Honestly, it really does. Like throughout the day, I know, like if I feel low at any point, I'm like, oh guys, like, you know, or if I want to share my wins with them, oh guys, this is what's happened, amazing. And everybody else, same thing. You know, having that is just such a beautiful thing. It really is. You know, money can't buy that. You know, I often say that.
And on that perfect end there, yeah, that note, we do have to wrap it up now, but you know, we can keep talking. But
I just wanted to hear if Donald had something to add.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just letting you know it's nearly time, but we've got time.
So what was the original question again? I got wrapped up in the conversation.
I don't remember either. It was
safe spaces, and how do we foster those? I'm guessing.
Yeah. Well, what is a safe space for us? I guess.
No. It was. Oh, I forgot. Yeah. Isolation. About how we're not, how not to isolate ourselves, and how can we help others not to isolate, other men not to isolate themselves.
Well, I think this, as I said, this is perfect for me just because I'm guilty of doing this unless I make a conscious effort to go out and speak to people. Am I still there?
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Unless I make a conscious effort of myself to put myself out there and start conversations and speak to more people, and it not be in a business sense. Because a lot of the conversations I have day to day are connecting with people, but it's ultimately like this person fits a particular avatar. They may or may not become a client down the line. Whereas for myself, I think it's very, very important that I start to get out there and speak to more men, that it's not like, oh, this person might become a client someday. It's more, I'm just out there to connect. And I think when I first started interacting with Jan, it was very much right. This person is the ideal client for me. And then he basically fobbed me off. And then I heard him on his the podcast that he did. I was like, actually, this guy's like me in a different body. It was so weird. And then he then added me, and I was like, oh, you're back again. And it was just that little bit of banter. And we've hit it off, and it feels like I've known him for years rather than a few weeks. So it's interesting how you can just, with the online space, like if you allow it to happen, that you can foster friendships and relationships just like you would if you met somebody, if you kind of like allow that to happen. And it's more just about putting myself in more situations where I can allow those things to happen.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I guess with you, or you know, or men that are, you know, that have something that is a product or something that is for other men, it must be really difficult. I completely understand that. It must be really difficult because there's always going to be these things. Okay, why is he approaching me? Obviously, my radar is on. Like I said to you guys, like, you know, entering the men's industry a few years ago, my radar was on, and when I saw, you know, men approach me to take part in their programs and stuff, I was always like, no. That, you get that Jan honesty straight away, you know. But it must be difficult to have those authentic kind of, you know, connections and things like that. Must be really difficult. So that I do understand. But, you know, we're as authentic as we can be on here. You know, this is a no judgment zone. You know, as you've seen, you know, we're just kind of like, you know, we're just very open. So you're more than welcome here. And, you know, I really, really value your contribution. You know, the fact that you're here, that you're sharing, that you're talking, and, you know, absolutely. I absolutely love that. And so thank you so much, guys, for your time this evening. Absolutely love it. Tony, again, thank you so much for, you know, coming back. And again, if you do dear back again, I'm going to get the fishing rod.
That's cool, mate. That's gonna be...
I'm going to put some kind of, you know, I didn't even put bait on it this time. I just threw the hook and then I pulled him in.
Come on. No, but thank you. It's good. It's great, and it's nice talking to you all this evening. Thank you. Thank you for the space.
No problem. And Eddie, you know I love you, so yeah. It's
Love you
good.
too. Yeah, you know, it's been yeah, it's been an interesting time coming back as for me. You know about this, Jan. We've had all these conversations about all sorts of different stuff. Some of it very kind of deep and intense stuff, and other times it's just been laughing. But actually, you know, whether you've gone and been away or you're not sure if you fit into a certain chat or whatever, it's always good just to, like, when you do, it's just it feels transformative. Yeah, that's been my experience. Like, stepping into the room it changes everything.
Yeah, there's always something that somebody can relate to. So that's great. That's great. Well, thank you so much, guys, and much love, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
See you later.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you,
Okay,
guys.
much love to you all.
It was good. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Okay.